Let's talk about The Lord of the Rings. It's a book written by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I read the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring. The book is quite boring. There's almost no humor, even though I admit most authors of fiction rarely put humor in their books. But personally, I think that it's important to put at least some humor in a book, whether it's an adventure, drama, suspense, science fiction, etc. A book of fiction with absolutely no humor looks dry and sterile. There is no romance. With such a plethora of characters, telling multiple stories and events, sometimes spanning decades, there is not a single shred of romance. Romance or humor are not necessary for a good story, but they can make the story a little more interesting and less boring. There is very little adventure or action. You would think that action would be the main ingredient of a story of fantasy, but that does not seem to be the case, at least not for this book. The main character of the book is Frodo, who is not a soldier and pretty much cannot fight and needs to be protected at all times by other people. So he needs to flee or hide or be protected at a time, which means actually very little action. For a book that is supposedly about fantasy, there is very little fantasy or magic. All the characters are surprisingly human, with human characteristics and human limitations. Frodo and the hobbits are actually smaller and weaker than normal humans. Sure, the Ring of Power can make you invisible, but that seems to be the limit of any magic in the book. Gandalf the Wizard apparently can make fire with magic, but that does not seem to be very impressive. So much of the story is told through dialogue. Characters meet and start talking to one another, and that's it. The narrator does not bother to actually show the events. Many events are just told and recalled by the characters. When a character tells a story, you never know if that character is actually telling the truth or lying. The character could also be mistaken, and even when the story is genuine, it's always from the point of view of that character, which may be subjective, personal, biased, or incomplete. So you should never trust the accounts of one character. And by telling the story through dialogue, you completely destroy any suspense or drama that could be infused into the story. When a narrator tells a story, you have no idea how the story will end, or who is going to die. If a character tells a story, we already know that at the very least that character will not die. There is no social or philosophical commentary. Many authors tell a story just as an excuse to make social or political or philosophical commentary, and such commentaries can be even more interesting than the story itself. You can find that kind of commentary, especially in authors like Michael Crichton, but in The Lord of the Rings I can't find any. Why is the author so obsessed with geography? Tolkien goes to great lengths to describe the geography of Middle-earth. That seems to be the least interesting aspect of the book. And yet the author is obsessed in describing with excruciating detail every single aspect of the geography of the places. There are hobbits, elves, wizards, dwarves, orcs, trolls, and yet they all seem to be indistinguishable to me. There is no interesting characteristic or feature in any of them. They all look very human and boring. Show, don't tell, as they say in the movie industry, but such a rule is not followed in this book. It is especially disturbing when talking about Sauron. We only know that Sauron is evil simply because we are told so by the characters. But at no point in the book we see Sauron actually doing anything evil. Sauron never even appears in the book, he is just mentioned by the characters. Are we supposed to trust the characters, or is Sauron just a misunderstood character, unfairly mistreated by everybody else? We are constantly told to be afraid of Sauron, and yet the book never tells us the reason for that. The movies directed by Peter Jackson seem to be much better than the books. There is no mystery. One way to grab the reader's attention is by arousing one's curiosity and offer some kind of mystery at the beginning of the book or chapter, and then offer clues throughout the story, and finally present a satisfactory solution to the mystery at the end of the book or chapter. But in the Fellowship of the Ring there is no such a thing. The ring is introduced in the first chapter, but it is thoroughly explained in the second chapter. There is no mystery. As I was reading the story, I was not curious at all. On the contrary, I was bored, asking myself, when is this going to end, and counting the number of remaining pages. There are no revelations, no plot twists, no surprises. Many books offer plot twists, where friends are revealed to be enemies, or enemies are revealed to be actually friends, or when the villain says, "I am your father," among other things. Plot twists can be very entertaining, and tell the reader that appearances are deceiving. Things may not be as they appear. Reality can be much more complicated, or interesting, or mysterious than previously thought. There is, I believe, a plot twist concerning Gandalf in the sequels, but not in this book. Some people say that the sequels are better. Maybe. I'm not sure if I read them. A trimmed, shorter version of this book would be much more enjoyable and tolerable. Maybe instead of reading the book, you should just watch the films. The main plot concerning the ring is good and interesting. Unfortunately, there is a lot of boring and unnecessary subplots throughout the book.